Hello everyone, and welcome back to our channel. Today, we have something truly special for you, a complete compilation of our full story, bringing together part 1, part 2, and part 3 into one seamless video. From the very first day Elias stepped into his studio, to Lena's cautious yet determined return, and through all the mysterious shadows, hidden traces, and the unspoken tension that grew between teacher and student, you will witness the entire journey from beginning to end. Every brushstroke, every sketch, every subtle glance has been captured for you, so you won't miss a single detail. This video is more than just a story. It's an experience of art, mystery, and human connection. You'll see how Elias guides his students, how Lena's talent evolves, and how secrets hidden in the studio slowly come to light. From moments of quiet reflection to sudden revelations, the story unfolds in a way that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Whether you've followed the story from the start or this is your first time, this full story compilation will let you dive into the world of Elias and Lena completely, feeling every tension, every discovery, and every emotion as it builds across all three parts. So grab a comfortable seat, focus on the details, and get ready to immerse yourself in the full adventure of Elias and Lena part 1, 2, and 3 all in one video. The studio is waiting, the shadows are alive, and the story is finally complete. Let's step in and see how it all unfolds. Welcome back to our channel Asma English. Today, we're diving into a brand new story full of excitement, emotions, and unexpected moments. Get comfortable, relax, and let your imagination follow every detail. Let's jump right into the adventure. In a small corner of the city, where narrow streets curled between old buildings, stood an art studio that carried more stories than its walls could hold. The wooden tables were worn by years of paint and restless hands, and the windows opened onto a soft, quiet light that made every color feel alive. Elias, the man who guided countless students through their first lines and uncertain strokes, had long found comfort in this place. He lived simply, moving each day between his modest apartment and the studio that felt more like a sanctuary than a workspace. Teaching had become his way of breathing steady, routine, safe. But life rarely stays still. Especially when someone unexpected walks in. The day Lena arrived, something subtle shifted. She carried a sketchbook pressed against her chest and a determination that didn't match her hesitant smile. There was a spark in her eyes, a mixture of curiosity and longing that Elias recognized instantly, though he couldn't yet explain why. From that moment, the quiet rhythm of the studio began to change. Not loudly, not suddenly, but like a soft note held too long in the air, unavoidable, undeniable, and filled with the promise of everything that would follow. Chapter 1: The Studio of Quiet Colors. Elias Merrick had taught drawing for nearly 10 years, yet each time he unlocked the wooden door of his small art studio, he felt the same quiet thrill. The studio stood at the end of an old stone alley, lit at sunset by warm gold streaks that spilled through dusty windows. Inside, canvases leaned against the walls, colors frozen mid-story, waiting for the next breath of life. Elias lived alone in a modest apartment above a noisy bakery. Nights were filled with the scent of warm bread and the faint hum of the city beneath him, but his heart often felt too silent. Teaching was the one place where his chest loosened, where he could breathe deeper. Among his students, one always stood out: Lena. She was bright, curious, and carried a sketchbook everywhere, as if afraid inspiration might flee if she blinked too long. Elias admired her persistence, but he tried to hide how her presence shook something in him, something he had not named yet. One evening, as he cleaned the studio after class, he found a drawing left on a table. It was a sketch of him captured with gentle lines and sharp eyes, as if the artist had studied him far longer than he noticed. At the bottom corner, small initials, LS Lena's. Elias stared at the drawing for a long time, feeling a strange warmth bloom in his chest. He was her teacher, yes, but something was changing, shifting like the first stroke of paint on an empty canvas. Chapter 2, Lessons in Light. The next day, the studio felt different, as if the walls themselves sensed the secret he carried. Lena arrived early, clutching her sketchbook tightly. Her dark hair was tied in a loose braid, and the morning sun painted soft lines across her face. "Good morning, Mr. Merrick," she said, breathless, as though she had run. Elias nodded, trying to keep his tone steady. "Today we study light. How it falls. How it reveals truth." He showed the students how to observe shadows, how to let the pencil glide without forcing it. But each time he turned, Lena's eyes were already on him. Something in them glimmered, respect, curiosity, maybe more. During break, she approached him. "I wanted to ask," she began, flipping through her sketchbook, "when you draw people, do you try to capture what they feel or what they hide?" The question tugged at him. "Both," he answered softly. "A portrait is half truth, half confession." Her lips curved into a shy smile. "That makes sense." As she walked away, Elias felt the world tilt ever so slightly. He could ignore her sketch, pretend it meant nothing, but his heart, stubborn and long-starved for tenderness, refused to stay silent. He knew he was standing at the edge of something delicate, dangerous as beautiful. Chapter 3, A Teacher's Heart. That evening, Elias returned to his apartment, the drawing still tucked inside his coat. Rain tapped against the window, blurring the city lights into soft streaks. He sat at his worn wooden desk, placed the sketch before him, and exhaled slowly. Why had she drawn him? What had she seen? Why did seeing himself through her eyes feel so intimate? He tried to distract himself by painting, but each stroke drifted into thoughts of her. Lena's focus, her questions, the way she held her pencil as if it were an extension of her heartbeat. A knock interrupted his thoughts. It was his neighbor, Mrs. Corrine, bringing leftover pastries as she often did. She spoke cheerfully, but paused when she noticed the paper on his desk. "You're drawing yourself now," she teased. "No," he said quickly, closing the sketch. "A student made it." Her eyebrows rose in amusement. "Ah. Lucky student, then. You inspire them more than you think." When she left, Elias leaned back in his chair, feeling the truth of her words. Teaching had always been his purpose, but now, it seemed to hold something deeper. Still, he reminded himself, he was her mentor. A line existed. A line that must not be crossed. Yet in his heart, that line was blurring, stroke by gentle stroke. Chapter 4, The Unfinished Canvas. The studio grew colder as autumn crept in. One afternoon, Elias assigned a new project. Each student had to paint something they feared losing. As the class worked, he walked among them, offering advice. When he reached Lena, he froze. Her canvas showed a man standing alone in a room of fading colors, his silhouette strong, but surrounded by emptiness. "It's someone who doesn't realize how important he is," she whispered. "Someone who gives light but forgets he deserves it, too." Elias swallowed. "It's powerful." Her eyes lifted to his. "Do you think so?" He nodded, unable to speak more. She hesitated before adding, "Sometimes the person you admire doesn't see himself the way you do." His heartbeat stumbled. He stepped back, pretending to adjust another student's brush, but his thoughts were in chaos. After class, he lingered alone before her painting, running a hand through his hair. He understood now, her art was a confession. And he had no idea how to answer it without breaking something precious. Chapter 5: Distance and Silence. For days, Elias kept his distance. He spoke to Lena politely, professionally, never letting his voice soften. He hoped it would cool whatever feelings had begun to bloom. But instead, the air between them tightened like a stretched canvas. Lena's smile dimmed, her sketches grew darker, and she avoided seeking his guidance. One evening, he found her sitting alone in the studio after everyone had left. Tears glimmered on her cheeks. "Lena, are you all right?" "You're avoiding me," she said softly. "Did I offend you?" His chest ached. "You didn't. I'm trying to protect you. And protect myself." She looked down. "From what?" "From feelings that shouldn't grow where they are," he whispered. Silence settled heavy between them. She stood, gathering her things, her voice trembling. "I never wanted to make things harder for you." Then she walked out, leaving a swirl of cold air behind her. That night, Elias couldn't sleep. He realized that silence meant to protect had only wounded them both. Chapter 6: Shadows Between Them. The days following their difficult conversation felt strangely quiet inside the studio. Elias continued teaching, but without Lena's presence, the room lost one of its brightest colors. Her desk remained empty, her brushes untouched, and the sunlight that usually fell on her spot seemed almost hesitant to enter. He tried to convince himself that distance was the right decision, that giving her space would help both of them breathe again. But each evening, when he locked up the studio, he caught himself glancing at the doorway, hoping she would walk in with her sketchbook pressed to her chest. One afternoon, while sorting through students' practice sheets, he found a page tucked between two canvases. It wasn't new, it was one of Lena's older sketches, but the sight of her careful lines made something tighten in his chest. She had always drawn with emotion first, technique second. That was what made her art alive. He sat at his desk, staring at the empty chair across the room. Had he pushed her too far? Had his silence wounded her more than he meant? Rain began tapping against the window, soft at first, then steadier. The studio filled with the scent of wet stone, and Elias suddenly felt the weight of all the words he hadn't said. He wasn't ready to cross the invisible line between them, yet losing her completely felt even more unbearable. That night, he walked home slowly, the sound of the rain echoing the ache inside him. Something had to change. But he didn't yet know how to reach her without breaking what was left. Chapter 7, A Door Half Open. 3 days passed before Elias found the courage to act. After class, he lingered alone in the quiet studio, the evening sun casting long shadows across the floor. He noticed a small envelope placed neatly on his desk, no name, just a faint smudge of charcoal on the corner. He opened it carefully. Inside was a simple sketch, 2 figures standing a few steps apart, their silhouettes soft, unsure, neither approaching nor turning away. Under it, Lena had written only 3 words: I miss learning. Not I miss you. Not I'm hurt. Just learning. It was her way of reaching out without crossing boundaries. Elias sat down, the message sinking deep. She wasn't asking for anything forbidden, only for the space they once shared, the art they built together, the lessons that had become a refuge for them both. As the sun dipped behind the rooftops, he made his decision. Tomorrow, he would reopen that space. Not as a confession, not as anything fragile or dangerous, only as a teacher who cared about his students' growth. He placed the sketch gently in his drawer, stood up, and turned off the lights. The studio felt different as he stepped out, less heavy, as if waiting for someone to return. Elias didn't know what conversation awaited them, or how they would rebuild the quiet trust they once had. But for the first time in many days, he felt something close to hope, soft, patient, and real. Chapter 8, The Space Between Lines. Elias entered the studio before sunrise, the air still cool and carrying the faint smell of paint and old wood. He moved quietly between the tables, placing papers and arranging brushes. When he reached Lena's empty seat, he hesitated, then set a single pencil at the center of the desk, a silent hope he didn't dare name. Students arrived slowly, filling the room with soft chatter. Elias began the lesson, explaining simple shadow techniques, but his attention drifted again and again toward the door. He tried to mask it, but the absence he felt was too familiar. Then, halfway through the class, the door creaked. Lena stepped inside. She walked with calm steps, her sketchbook held close. Her eyes searched the room briefly before landing on him. She offered a quiet nod, nothing more, yet it eased something heavy inside him. She took her usual seat and touched the pencil he had placed for her, as if recognizing the gesture without needing words. She started drawing immediately. Her movements were careful but sure, like someone returning to a place they weren't ready to lose. Elias moved around the room, guiding students, though his heart beat a little faster each time he passed near her desk. When he finally stopped beside her, he spoke softly. "I'm glad you came back." She didn't look up, but a small smile appeared. "I wasn't ready to stop learning," she whispered. After class, the students left one by one. Lena remained a moment longer, closing her sketchbook with slow, thoughtful fingers. "There's still a lot we haven't said," she murmured. "I know," Elias replied. "We'll talk when the moment feels right." She nodded, stepped toward the door, then paused. "This story, it's not finished," she said gently. And then she left, sunlight catching her silhouette for a brief, warm second before she disappeared into the alley. Elias stayed in the quiet studio, feeling that something had shifted softly, carefully, but enough to begin again. And that brings us to the end of part 1. Their studio became a place of quiet lessons, unspoken feelings, and hidden tensions. Now, as shadows and whispers grow stronger, we step into part 2, where new challenges, secrets, and unexpected turns await our characters. Let's dive back into their world. The city breathed under a gray, misty morning, its narrow streets gleaming with the memory of last night's rain. Inside a small art studio, sunlight fought through the windows, catching dust and color in delicate streaks. Elias stepped in, feeling the familiar pulse of the place, but something was different. The studio was no longer just a room of brushes and sketches. It had become a space alive with whispers, secrets, and quiet anticipation. Each canvas seemed to wait, each shadow hinted at stories untold. Lena had returned, her sketchbook close, her gaze sharp yet cautious. Their worlds had already brushed together, but now, the currents between them were stronger, more unpredictable. Every line, every stroke, every glance could change the rhythm of their days. This was a beginning. A subtle shift. A doorway to a story that promised mystery, growth, and challenges neither was prepared for. Chapter 1: The Whisper of New Colors. The morning sun spilled over the city's narrow streets, touching every stone with a pale, golden glow. Elias arrived at the studio earlier than usual, the familiar smell of paint and old wood greeting him like an old friend. It had been a few weeks since Lena's cautious return, yet something in the air felt different, charged, expectant, as though the walls themselves waited for something to happen. The studio had regained its quiet rhythm. Students moved between tables, brushes in hand, sketches scattered across worn wooden surfaces. Elias felt the comforting hum of creativity, yet his attention drifted continually toward the doorway, waiting for her small, careful steps, for the soft click of the door that had become a kind of heartbeat in his days. Lena appeared as if summoned by his thoughts. Her sketchbook tucked under her arm, she stepped lightly across the floor, her presence gentle yet undeniably magnetic. She paused, observing the room, and then met Elias's gaze. No words passed between them, only a small, acknowledging nod, an unspoken agreement that today, as always, their worlds would brush against one another, delicate as the edge of a freshly sharpened pencil. "Good morning," Elias said, keeping his voice steady, though he felt a flutter of anticipation. "Good morning, Mr. Merrick," Lena replied, her tone soft, yet brimming with a confidence that had begun to grow steadily over the past weeks. The class began, each student focusing on their new assignments. Elias moved between tables, demonstrating techniques for blending colors, layering shadows, and capturing subtle emotions in every stroke. Yet, with each step, his eyes wandered toward Lena, noting the way her hand hovered over the page before touching the pencil to paper. There was precision in her hesitation, an elegance in her focus that made the act of drawing feel almost sacred. "Remember," Elias said as he approached her, "your lines must speak what words cannot. Let the pencil follow the rhythm of your thoughts, not just your eyes." Lena's fingers tightened slightly around her pencil, then relaxed, letting the motion flow. Her sketch began to take shape, a portrait of a figure standing amidst a swirl of shadows and light. The strokes were bold yet delicate, filled with emotion Elias could feel more than see. As the class continued, a subtle tension developed. Elias felt it creeping through the room, not in the student's work, but between him and Lena. Something unspoken hovered in the air, fragile yet undeniable. Each glance, each small movement carried a weight they both sensed but neither acknowledged. Break time arrived, and students wandered toward the windows, observing the city beyond, their chatter filling the studio with life. Elias leaned against a table, pretending to examine a sketch, but his gaze remained fixed on Lena. She looked up from her work, noticing him, and for a moment, the world narrowed. "Are you thinking about something?" she asked quietly, her voice almost lost in the ambient noise. Elias paused. He could have brushed it off, pretended to be absorbed in another student's work, but something in her calm inquiry demanded honesty. "I'm thinking about your last sketch," he said. "The one with the shadows. You captured something. Something I didn't expect to see." Lena's eyes flickered, a mixture of pride and uncertainty crossing her face. "I'm learning to see things differently," she murmured. "To notice what people don't always show." Elias nodded slowly. The way she phrased it, the subtle shift in her tone, hinted at growth: personal, artistic, emotional. He had guided many students, yet none had ever approached the world with such intensity and subtlety combined. The afternoon passed in a blur of colors, sounds, and half-whispered words. Each student left the studio eventually, carrying their sketches and small victories. Elias and Lena remained, tidying supplies, arranging brushes, and cleaning smudges of paint from the tables. Silence stretched comfortably between them, punctuated by the occasional scrape of a pencil or the faint creak of the floorboards. Finally, Lena spoke. "Do you think some things can't be captured by drawing?" Elias considered this. He glanced at her, noting the earnest look in her eyes, and then at the sketch she had left on the table, a faint, almost imperceptible outline of a figure moving toward a distant light. "Some things," he said carefully, "are felt more than seen. But that attempt can be more powerful than any perfect line." Lena nodded, absorbing his words. A quiet understanding passed between them, as if they had both acknowledged something that needed no articulation. As the sun dipped below the rooftops, casting long, amber shadows across the studio, Elias felt a stirring of anticipation. Something was coming: an event, a challenge, or perhaps a revelation. He could sense it in the shift of the air, in the way Lena had lingered a moment longer than usual, in the subtle tension that refused to dissipate. He placed the last brushes in their jars and stepped back, surveying the room. The studio seemed ordinary, yet he knew it was anything but. Each corner held potential, each canvas a doorway, and every pencil stroke was a whisper of what was to come. Tomorrow, he thought, everything may change. And as he locked the door and walked into the evening chill, Elias couldn't shake the feeling that the world outside had grown slightly larger, slightly more dangerous, and infinitely more fascinating. Lena's quiet determination, the shadows she had captured, and the subtle currents between them hinted at a story far deeper than any class exercise. Chapter 2: Shadows and Secrets. The morning arrived damp and gray, a thin drizzle pattering against the narrow streets outside the studio. Inside, the familiar scent of paint and wood mingled with the faint aroma of wet stone from the alley. Elias unlocked the door with his usual careful rhythm, the sound of the latch echoing slightly in the otherwise silent room. He stepped in, noting the soft dampness on the floorboards, the faint gleam of light reflecting from the canvases propped along the walls. The students began to arrive, their chatter bouncing softly across the studio's walls. Elias greeted each with measured warmth, his eyes flicking unconsciously toward the door each time it opened, waiting for the one person he had learned to expect, Lena. She entered a few minutes later, brushing rain from her coat, her sketchbook tucked tightly under her arm. Her presence was a quiet force, drawing attention without needing to speak. Elias watched her take her usual seat near the window, the morning light catching her hair and making it glow in subtle streaks of gold. The lesson began, and Elias moved through the room, demonstrating techniques for capturing light and shadow. He emphasized not just the technical side of art, but the emotional undertones, the hidden stories behind each line and color. "Your shadows tell more than your shapes," he said, circling a student's desk. "A simple line can reveal a fear, a desire, or a memory if you let it breathe." Lena's hand hovered over her pencil, hesitating before touching the page. Elias watched, noting the tension in her wrist, the slight narrowing of her eyes. She was learning, yes, but there was more, a subtle struggle in her strokes, as if she were wrestling with an invisible force beyond the paper. Break arrived, and the students drifted toward the window. Outside, the rain had lightened, leaving the streets slick and glistening. Elias leaned against a table, pretending to examine sketches, but his mind wandered to Lena's last work, a study of a solitary figure enveloped in swirling shadows. He had studied it in private, trying to understand what drew him so strongly to her interpretations. "Mr. Merrick?" Lena's voice broke his focus. She had set down her pencil and looked at him cautiously, her eyes searching. "Do you ever feel like the shadows you draw are telling the truth more than the light?" Elias froze for a heartbeat, considering her words. There was wisdom in the question, but also a challenge, a subtle push to recognize more than technique, more than surface appearances. "Yes," he admitted finally. "Often, the shadows reveal what is hidden, what people try not to show. But they are also dangerous, they can mislead, or overwhelm, if you do not understand them fully." Lena nodded slowly, taking in his words. Her gaze returned to her sketch, but Elias could see the shift in her expression. She was pondering, calculating, trying to understand both the art and herself in ways he hadn't expected. The afternoon deepened, the rain outside replaced by a pale sun struggling to pierce the clouds. Students left one by one, carrying their sketches and whispered accomplishments. The studio grew quieter, the soft hum of the city fading into the distance. Elias and Lena remained, clearing brushes, organizing pencils, and occasionally exchanging brief remarks about composition or technique. Then, without warning, Lena stopped, staring at a blank corner of the studio wall. Elias followed her gaze. The sunlight, though dim, had caught a pattern in the dust on the wall, a faint outline, almost like an impression of movement. "What is it?" he asked. "I don't know," Lena admitted, her voice a whisper. "It looks like something tried to leave a mark but didn't finish." Elias frowned. There was an odd quality to the observation, an almost eerie resonance. He stepped closer, studying the outline. It reminded him of a gesture or a shadow in one of her sketches, but somehow more real, more deliberate. "Sometimes," he said carefully, "our surroundings speak to us in ways we cannot fully explain. We see reflections of ourselves in places we never thought mattered. Lena looked up, eyes meeting his. Do you think someone else could have been here? He shook his head slightly, though the chill at the back of his neck suggested otherwise. I don't know, he confessed. But you're noticing things most would miss. That is a gift and a warning. The tension between them grew in the quiet room. It was not discomfort, but awareness and understanding that the studio, once a place of ordinary instruction, now held secrets neither fully grasped. Elias realized that their bond was developing not just through lessons or art, but through the unspoken recognition of the unknown. Night approached, and Lena gathered her things. She paused at the doorway, sketchbook in hand. Tomorrow, she said softly, I want to try something different. Something more daring. Elias considered the words. Daring can be dangerous, he warned, though a part of him thrilled at the prospect. But sometimes it is necessary to truly grow. She smiled faintly, stepping out into the quiet street. The city lights glimmered off the wet pavement, casting elongated reflections. Elias lingered in the studio, staring at the faint shadow on the wall, pondering the day's events. He felt the subtle pull of something new, a challenge, a revelation, or perhaps a confrontation waiting just beyond the next sunrise. Lena's determination, the unexplained mark, and the intensity of their unspoken connection promised that their journey was far from over. In part 2, Elias and Lena's story continues in the familiar art studio, but the atmosphere has shifted. Lena has returned, her presence quietly commanding attention, and the bond between teacher and student grows more complex. Chapter 1 showed the soft tension and unspoken connection between them, highlighting their shared moments of learning, focus, and subtle understanding. Chapter 2 introduced a hint of mystery. Lena notices a strange shadow or mark in the studio, something unfinished yet deliberate, suggesting secrets and challenges are about to emerge. The day's lesson emphasized emotions hidden in light and shadow, and the quiet awareness between Elias and Lena hints at deeper developments to come. The stage is set for discoveries, challenges, and emotional growth that will test their skills, courage, and hearts. We've followed them through their first encounters, the growth of their bond, and the mysteries of the studio, the shadows, the hidden traces, and the secrets waiting to be discovered. In this last segment, the story reaches its peak. Secrets will be unveiled, tensions will rise, and the connection between teacher and student will face the ultimate test. Every sketch, every shadow, every quiet glance matters. Get ready, because today we are exploring the final chapter of our tale, the conclusion you've been waiting for. Let's step back into the studio and see how it all unfolds. So far, we've followed Elias, a dedicated art teacher, and Lena, his talented and determined student, through a journey of discovery, emotions, and subtle tensions. In part 1, we witnessed their first encounters, the delicate dance between guidance and personal growth, and the quiet, unspoken connection that slowly began to form between them. Their studio became more than a classroom. It became a place where thoughts, feelings, and hidden struggles intertwined, captured in every line, every brushstroke. In part 2, the story grew more complex. Lena returned, stronger and more confident, yet a sense of mystery began to surface. She noticed strange shadows and marks in the studio, subtle hints that something beyond their lessons was unfolding. The quiet understanding between Elias and Lena deepened, but with it came questions, tensions, and the awareness that their journey was about to take a turn. Now, in part 3, their world is about to change even more. Secrets will be revealed, challenges will test both skill and courage, and unexpected events will force them to confront not only the art they create, but the truths they have kept from themselves and each other. As shadows and whispers grow stronger, Elias and Lena are about to step into new territory, one that promises growth, danger, and the continuation of their intertwining destinies. Prepare to enter the studio once more, where every corner hides a secret, every sketch holds a clue, and every interaction carries the weight of unspoken emotions. The story continues, and nothing will be the same. Chapter 1: Echoes of the Unseen. Morning light spilled through the studio windows, casting long shadows across the worn wooden floor. Elias entered first, carrying the calm authority of years spent guiding young artists. Yet today, the air felt different, charged, expectant, as though the walls themselves awaited something. Lena arrived moments later, sketchbook tucked under her arm, steps cautious but determined. Her gaze briefly met Elias's, a quiet acknowledgement passing between them. Since noticing the strange shadow in the studio last week, she had felt a pull, an unseen presence urging her attention. Students settled into their usual rhythm, brushes moving, pencils scratching. Elias walked among them, offering guidance, but his eyes continually sought Lena. Her hand hovered above the paper, deliberate and precise, as if waiting for something invisible to reveal itself. Today, he said finally, we explore not just what we see, but what hides beneath the spaces between lines, the pauses between brushstrokes. Shadows have stories too. Lena began to draw, each line flowing with a growing intensity, capturing forms that seemed alive, almost shifting before the eye. Elias watched closely, a mixture of pride and unease stirring within him. She had grown beyond technique, touching something deeper, something neither fully understood. During a short break, Lena looked at him. Do you think some things try to speak to us? Yes, he said, meeting her gaze. And often, the first thing we notice is only the surface. Truths hide in quiet moments, waiting for eyes willing to see. Returning to her work, Lena's sketches began revealing subtle hints of figures and movement, forms familiar yet unfamiliar, blending light and shadow with careful precision. The studio seemed to hum, as though alive, the quiet tension building between teacher and student palpable. Chapter 2: The Hidden Imprint. The studio felt unusually quiet that morning, sunlight barely piercing the dust in the air. Elias entered first, sensing something unsettled, a faint echo of the shadow Lena had noticed lingering in his thoughts. The room seemed to hold its breath, waiting. Lena arrived shortly after, sketchbook under her arm, eyes scanning the corners with careful curiosity. She paused at the doorway, then stepped in, the tension in her posture betraying both excitement and caution. Elias watched her, noticing the way her fingers grazed the edge of her sketchbook, a silent preparation for what was to come. Students settled into their work, but Elias and Lena shared a silent connection. Every glance, every slight movement carried meaning beyond words. Elias moved among the tables, offering guidance, yet his attention kept returning to her, drawn to the intensity in her focus. Pay attention not only to the lines, he said softly as he approached her desk, but to the spaces between them. Sometimes what is missing reveals more than what is there. Lena's pencil hovered, then pressed down with determination. Her sketch began to take form, a figure reaching toward a distant light, surrounded by swirling shadows. The studio felt alive, every corner humming with unseen energy. Elias sensed the tension between the visible and invisible, control and discovery. A faint sound from the back of the room made them both pause. A scraping, subtle yet deliberate. Lena froze, scanning the studio. Elias' hand moved instinctively toward a canvas, but all appeared unchanged. "Did you hear that?" she whispered. "I did," he replied, calm but alert. The studio tests those who pay attention. Sometimes it speaks only to those willing to notice. Chapter 3: Veiled Movements. The studio greeted them with its usual quiet, yet the air felt different, charged, expectant. Elias noticed the faint shadow Lena had discovered lingering in his thoughts, a silent question in every corner. Lena entered, sketchbook under her arm, eyes sharp and searching. She paused, sensing something unseen, a pull she couldn't explain. Elias watched, noting the tension in her posture, the careful grip on her pencil. Today's session was not just about drawing, it was about noticing what lay hidden. Students began their work, yet their presence seemed distant to Elias and Lena, who moved through a subtle dialogue of glances and unspoken understanding. Elias approached her table, voice calm but intentional, noticed the spaces, the pauses, the weight between lines. Shadows often hold truths unseen. Lena's pencil hovered before descending, strokes deliberate, forming shapes that seemed almost alive. Figures emerged from darkness, moving toward faint light, shadows curling around them. Elias felt a pull in the studio, an intensity neither fully understood. A soft noise echoed like a whisper against the floor. Lena froze, eyes wide, scanning. Elias followed, but nothing had shifted. "The studio watches," he murmured. "It reveals itself only to those who pay attention." Hours passed, filled with quiet observation and careful strokes. Lena's sketches captured more than form, they hinted at questions, hidden movements, and a presence beyond the visible. The room hummed with potential, with tension, with the promise of what was yet to come. By afternoon, light waned, amber across the walls. Elias stepped back, studying her work. Today had changed something subtle yet profound. Their bond with each other and the studio had deepened. As they tidied brushes, Elias felt a quiet thrill. The shadows would not remain silent, and the story unfolding between them was only beginning. Chapter 4: The Unveiled Trace. The late afternoon sun stretched amber light across the studio floor. Elias moved quietly among the tables, sensing the subtle shift since Lena had returned. The shadows seemed deeper, the air heavier, alive with expectation. Lena entered, sketchbook under her arm, eyes scanning the corners. She paused at the familiar shadow, the imprint that had lingered in her thoughts for days. Today, she approached it deliberately, pencil poised as if to capture more than shape. Elias watched, knowing this moment could change everything. "Focus not only on what you see," he said softly, "but on what wants to be revealed. Shadows carry stories words cannot." Her pencil moved with intent, forming figures intertwined with light and shadow. Each line seemed alive, hinting at fleeting movements and unspoken emotions. The studio responded, the walls, the air, the faint city hum, like it was aware of their attention. Then a faint shift caught their eyes. A corner of the room revealed a subtle outline, barely visible, as if pressed into memory. Lena's fingers trembled. Elias stepped closer. "These traces are not accidents," he murmured. "They are fragments of what the space remembers, waiting for those who notice." Hours passed in quiet focus. The sketches spoke of hidden truths, secrets, and emotions too delicate for words. Elias and Lena shared an unspoken connection, forged through attention, intuition, and trust. As the sun dipped behind rooftops, Lena set her pencil down. Elias nodded, sensing both completion and anticipation. They had uncovered part of the mystery, but the studio still held whispers of secrets yet to be revealed. The brushes were cleaned, sketches stacked, the studio calm again. Shadows had spoken, they had listened. And as they stepped into the evening, the city's hum felt different, full of promise, danger, and unseen paths yet to be explored. In Part 3, Elias and Lena faced the studio's hidden mysteries more directly. Shadows and subtle marks hint at secrets the space itself holds. Lena's sketches become more intense, capturing movements and forms that feel almost alive, while Elias guides her to see not just the surface, but the spaces between lines and strokes. Throughout 4 chapters, tension and curiosity build. Strange noises, faint imprints on the walls, and the unspoken connection between teacher and student grows stronger. By the final chapter, the hidden traces reveal part of the mystery, but enough remains unseen to keep anticipation alive. Elias, a devoted art teacher, guides Lena, a talented student, through the mysteries of his studio. From their first lessons to Lena's growing confidence, they explore not just technique, but the unseen, the shadows, hidden imprints, and subtle tensions between them. As the story unfolds, Lena's sketches capture movement, emotion, and secrets lurking in the studio, while Elias helps her notice the spaces between lines. Their bond deepens through observation, intuition, and shared discoveries. By the final chapter, some of the studio's mysteries are revealed, their connection is stronger than ever, and the story closes with anticipation and wonder, leaving space for imagination. Now it's your turn. Share your thoughts in the comments. Which sketch or moment in the story fascinated you the most? What do you think the shadows and hidden traces truly mean? How do you see Elias and Lena's relationship evolving after the story? If the story continued, what would you want them to discover next? Comment below with your answers. Thank you for following the full journey of Elias and Lena. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. The studio's shadows may have quieted, but their whispers and secrets linger. Keep observing, stay curious, and enjoy the magic in the unseen.